Hello, everyone. My name is Travis Lucina, and I'm the Director of Education at the Walt Disney Family Museum. And I'm proud to have you here to be part of Walt Disney's birthday celebration that we have had going on all week long. Today, I'm going to be working with you to construct your own miniature diorama in the form of a milk carton home. This is going to be a home that is all-inclusive to you and your family, your friends, your pets, anything that's really special for you that you want to put into it, you can. And we're going to be working based off the inspiration of Mary Blair with some pattern blocking, with some simple geometric shapes and some pastel colors. Before we get into all the supplies that you see in front of you here, I just want to talk a little bit about the process that I'm going to be doing. A lot of what I'm going to show you are going to be tips and techniques on how to create these shapes, how to cut them out, how to paint, how to put them together. Some of the steps will be shortened for time, such as I will be doing a little bit of painting and then I will magically have a completed milk carton home so that we don't have to quite literally watch paint dry. Most of the steps will be walked through so that you can see how to do it so that you can then move forward from that step to a more complicated step if you see fit. Okay, so the supplies that you see here are some of the things that we're going to have and that we're going to use today. You can see that I have a pencil. I also have a paintbrush for some paint. It's okay if you don't have paint. I'm not too worried about that. I have a ruler because we are going to be doing some measuring. I'm going to show you some tricks and tips on that. And in addition to that, I just like it for some of the straighter edges. You can see I have some scissors, I have a glue stick, I've got some colored pencils. I also have construction paper here, different colors that we'll be using. Again, just like the paint, it's okay if you don't have construction paper. You can do this with regular cardboard if you'd like. I also have some broken up kind of like snack boxes here for crackers and things that we're going to be using for certain pieces of our building. Again, you can just also watch and learn from this workshop here and just check it out and see if it's something that you'd like to do. Please feel free to follow along with what I do moving forward. If you decide you want to create your own, you can certainly do that. But if you feel like you want to just go sort of step by step with what we're doing here, feel free. Again, some of the painting process will go a little bit faster than normal. So just know that we're not really going to stop to pause to paint very much. Okay, I'm going to make sure that everything is focused here perfectly, and we're going to start off by looking at our milk carton here. So I have just this empty milk carton that I'm going to use and I'm going to paint here in a second. How I want to play with this first is I want to think about this sort of as a taller building and a taller house. And again, in the spirit of those geometric shapes that you might see on It's a Small World or any Mary Blair art, we're going to apply those both with paint and with construction paper. The first thing that I want to do actually before I jump into painting is one, that I want to sketch out my design, and then two, I want to at least get one measurement of one of these sides. They're all the same, and I'm not going to worry too much about the top just yet, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take some paper here and I'm going to start to sketch out my design. Now, how I do that is very much in this kind of rough way where I just kind of do these basic rectangles like this. And I'm going to do 4 of them. I'm not worried if they're all perfectly even. I'm not worried if they're totally to scale. Okay, so I have these 4 little sketches here. I'm going to bring my camera down just a little bit closer so you guys can see this a little bit better. And I'm using this as the base for my 4 walls here. So when I look at this, I can kind of decide, okay, which side of this do I actually want to be sort of the front of my home? And for me, I'm going to decide that the side with the opening here is going to be the front. Some people like to do it to the side here to use this as a chimney if they'd like, and they feel like it's a little more house-like. I like to do it this way. I really kind of like seeing the front, knowing that it is a milk carton. I also know that some people will put things in here like maybe some flowers, or they might put some decorations coming out of it, or they like to do whatever it is, or even just a chimney on the front. So when I draw out these 4 sketches, I want to think about the fact that 2 of the sides are going to have sort of the top. Here's the opening. And what I'm doing is I'm going to go front and then back. So these will have the same kind of top shapes. And again, right now I'm not really worried about decorating here, even if these are absolutely perfect. This is just a quick sketch. And then the other 2 are going to sort of come up like this. And I'm just going to make them sort of thin like that. Now, I want to think about this very much geometrically. I'm going to, again, work in sort of the spirit of kind of a tiny world geometric pastel sort of feel, very simplistic. So as I play with this, first of all, I'm not worried about the measurements or anything just yet, because I want to just simply get a sketch out here. So I'm thinking this is going to be the front of my home. And so when I work with these geometric shapes, whether these are triangles or rectangles or even circles of some kind, my feeling is that I want to keep them simple and less is more in this sense. I'm mostly going to be working with triangles and kind of rectangles here. So the first thing that I'm going to do on this one is I really like this idea of these sort of 4 triangles, kind of like this. And I'm going to have it be that I just draw this X. 2 of these shapes will be left open for the paint that I put onto my milk carton, and 2 of them will be left with paper. Before I move on, let me explain that what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my milk carton and I'm going to paint all the sides all over it one color. I'm actually going to paint it sort of this kind of this like teal. It says it's a light green blue. I want to have everything one color, and then the shapes that I put on will be made out of paper. You can decide to make the walls whatever colors you'd like. It's totally up to you. But for me, when I get in here and I take this, I'm going to paint all 4 sides one color first, and then I'm adding shapes to that. So for me, when I do this, these 2 pieces will probably be white paper when I cut them out. So what I can do is I could even come in here and I could shade this in just to know that it's going to be the color that I want, or I could just take my colored pencil here and I could just say, okay, look, I know that right now for this, all of this area is going to be that teal, and these are going to be white. I can then move to the next section, and I know that this is my front. This is my back. And for me, I want to keep it really simple. So I'm doing the same exact sort of pattern on the back as well. The difference is what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these 2 areas open with the paint. And then these 2 are going to be white triangles that I cut out of paper. So this is all going to sort of be painted in like that. Now, again, I'm thinking geometrically. I'm thinking, okay, what is it that I want to do with these designs themselves? So next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of make something a little bit, maybe slightly more complicated, but still pretty simple. I think I'm going to have this whole section up here just sort of be kind of like a box, almost like a white rectangle. Eventually I may draw something in here like a circle or something like that. I'll decide that later. But then again, I want some of these almost like right angle triangles in this section. And so I'm going to kind of like make these simple shapes like this. And I know that this is going to be paint, and then these are going to be white. This will probably be painted too. I may leave it white later when I sort of paint it. It's kind of, you know, my choice for however I'm working. And then the last one, I want to make it a little bit more complex on the side. So this is kind of like side one. I don't care if it's my right or my left. I can decide that also later. Here's the second side. And for this one, I think I'm going to go, again, a little more complex. I want to put in some like little boxes, like checkered kind of boxes here. And I want things, again, to sort of balance. And so I'm going to do the same sort of shape up top. And then maybe I want to put in like some diamonds here. Okay, so I'm going to add some diamonds. Now these are sort of my basic plans here. I know that this is mostly going to be left open and painted. And again, I can shade this in with just my pencil. This part you can take longer if you'd like. Again, if you're following along, these are just pretty simple versions. You know, I would recommend, if you want to take more time, sort of follow along with this with some of the other steps and then come back to your sketch, because we're going to leave our sketch here in a second. I'm also going to say that these two sections are going to be sort of like kind of that paint as well. Okay, so I have my four sides here. Now I also really kind of want to think about this as far as it being maybe like a house of some kind. So even though I've put in some paint and things like that, you know, maybe I want to just come in with sort of a pencil and say like, okay, I will later on kind of have like a window here, and maybe I'll have like a door down here. Maybe on this one, I'll kind of flip it and I'll sort of have some windows, because I want to put some people in at the very end, or some characters, or whatever it is. You know, maybe on this one's kind of more angled, so maybe I want to put sort of like a cool sort of window. And I'm not worried right now about the shapes necessarily, again, being perfect or totally accurate. It's just that I want to remember that I'm putting windows in, or doors, so that when I go to create this, I have some sense that there will be some other things in here in some of this space. So here's sort of my house. I'll probably have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and a door. Works for me. This may be a window. This may just be even a design or something else. Again, I'm not worried about the top parts just yet. We'll look at this towards the very end. Okay, so that's my basic sketch for this. Now, what I want to do is I want to start to, for me, I'm going to paint this. So I want to start to paint this with some white. Before I do that, though, I want to kind of measure out the sides and get an accurate sizing piece of it before I slap a bunch of paint on it and then go, wait, now I don't really know how big, and I'm going to get paint all over my ruler or things like that. So I'm going to back this up. Bear with me here just for a second. So we kind of lift. And what I think I'll do with this is I'm going to simply just take a piece of paper here, and I'm going to start to mark out my measurements. Now, just in doing this previously, sort of in practices and things like that, I know that most milk cartons and juice cartons basically are about 3 3/4, or I should say they're more like 7 3/4 by 3 3/4. So they're not quite 8 by 4, and I'm only measuring from this top section down to the bottom here. I'm not really worried too much about everything up here because, again, I'll get to that at the very, very end. So I'm just going to measure this section that I kind of drew in. So from the top to the bottom, it's about 7 3/4 inches roughly, and it's about 3 3/4 inches sort of across here. Okay, so I could come onto my paper here and measure that whole thing out. I could also just kind of quickly sort of take this if I wanted to and just sort of trace it on. So there are two ways. One is you could just sort of come at this and get a basic idea and say, okay, there it is. I've kind of got my 2 lines here. Works for me. The other way, I'll just show you a quick little measurement because we are going to do some measurement things, is that when I'm going to measure sort of my height here, I can come at this and what I like to do is, even if I'm lining up my ruler down on this side, sometimes I'll even line it up at the 1. I just have to remember that I can't count up to here. I have to add an additional inch. But some people like that because they feel like the 1 is easier to see than the edge here. When I come at this and I say, okay, it's going to be 7 3/4, I'll make a mark like that. I will then jump down and I'll make anywhere from a total of 4 to 6 little marks when measuring something. And, you know, for some of us, we don't like measuring, or it's possible we haven't really done very much of it, and it can seem a little bit confusing. But I mark a few of these. I'm going to mark 5 of them, just kind of down my paper here. I'm going this way because it's, even though it's turned to the side, this is going to be the height. And so now that I have these 5 marks, I can line these up pretty well. And even if one of them is like a little bit off or a little bit weird or wonky, as long as the rest of them are pretty good, I should be okay. So that's working that way. Now I'm going to measure across this way. And again, you may be pretty used to this and doing some measurements like this. I just want to show everybody a few little things that have sort of helped me in staying accurate when I'm measuring. And mostly what that is for me is making sure that I'm marking more than once or twice. Because there's nothing worse than when we mark it like once at the top and once at the bottom and they are completely off from each other. And then you just get this diagonal line. So I have that. It's looking pretty good. Marking it. Ta-da! This is basically the wall I have now for my milk carton. Okay. Now I have this set up just for later when I need it. Again, I'll write the measurements on here in just a few moments. The other piece of this is that if you, let's say, don't have paints, like I'm going to be demoing some paint here in a second, and you actually want to just use some paper to cover up your walls, you can do that too. For this, I'm simply going to trace this pretty quickly. And that is so that I can show you some of the pitfalls too in kind of quickly tracing, but also putting the paper on. So I'm coming in here and marking kind of the top and then the side. Now look, it kind of bubbled up here. I know it's kind of coming across. That's because I went around this piece, so maybe don't make that mistake. So if you don't have paint, you can certainly just use some paper cutouts and make the walls. You can make them individually, or you could make them all one long piece if you'd like. The trade-off is that when you're painting, it takes longer because you have to wait for everything to dry and it can be a little bit messier. The paper is quicker, but it may not be quite as accurate. It may sort of pop over the edges a little bit, like this isn't totally perfect. And if I do 4 of these, the seams may not be as seamless unless I really glue it down tight. So I could do it just simply like this and say, great, I have a base color, and then I'll add my shapes to that. I'm going to quickly paint this on. And when I'm painting, and I'll switch to kind of a bigger brush here. Probably won't paint the entire thing, but just sort of a section, again, just for time. I'm using a white acrylic to sort of start, and I'm just going over this. Now, I have cleaned this off because sometimes there may be some grease on it, or perhaps it's even a little bit wet in some way, and sometimes the paint reacts differently anyway, just to working on this wax container. It depends on what you have, but I always like to clean it and dry it just so that it's really set to go with as few issues as possible. So I'm going over this. You can see that it's pretty white. Under the camera, it's pretty blown out here, which is great. When I can see it, though, I can still see that there are some of the like words, or some of the logo still showing, or some of the imagery. So I want to go over this a few times. I also want to make this kind of as smooth as possible, going back and forth. Can do that up and down. Naturally, you may get some clumps or some chunks, which is, you can always smooth out, but it also can give you a good sense of like texture, perhaps, for your milk carton here, to make it look a little bit like a stucco wall or something like that. For me, I might have to do a second coat once this dries, again, depending on the paint that I'm working with. It may be that I have to wait for it to dry, and drying can take, depending on how much paint you put on too, can take anywhere from 15 minutes to sometimes 45 minutes. Like for me, I can still see the logo here, even though you guys can't quite see it. So I would probably need to go over this again. And you may run into this too, where it starts to, you paint and then some of it starts to pull away, which is why we also want to be smooth and consistent, moving up and down and left and right. So I would do this with all 4 sides, and I would probably do it up here on the top as well. I'm going to stop here just so that I can give you a couple tips. One is that as you rotate this, you will have an edge that starts to possibly touch down here. I have paper set up, which I should have mentioned earlier, so that I'm not getting any paint onto my table. I would wear clothes that definitely you're not too worried about getting messed up, or some kind of apron. We always say that it's not called an accident because you do it on purpose. And sometimes you just get things that, the paint gets spilled, or you touch something important, or, whatever, smear it across. So as you work through this, just know that if you're holding it, you may want to let a couple sides dry before you move on to the next sides. So that's the base coat that I would do. I would paint this whole thing white everywhere, all around, probably not the bottom itself unless you really want to, but all sides. And then I would come in with my teal, and once this was dry, I would do the same thing and paint over it. Now you can pick whatever color you'd like. Like I said, I chose this teal. And so here is my finished milk carton about 20 minutes after we've started here. Okay, so the magic of live video. The milk carton itself, again, I have a few little places that it's got some texture that maybe you can't see as well under the camera, but for the most part, it's all pretty smooth. I like how it's looking. I've decided to leave these areas white so that it's a little pop of white, so that it's not just the teal everywhere, so that when I add the shapes, these become sort of white popping shapes as well. I got a little bit of paint on here, but I'm not too worried about that, because again, I can sort of leave it open, or I could even just repaint some of this with white if it really bothers me enough that's right there. Okay, so if you've decided to paint, you can definitely do this after this video. I wouldn't try to paint everything now and watch, because what we are going to do is we're going to jump into our shapes right now. So one of the things that I want to do when I jump into my shapes is that I want to keep in mind my sketch, and then I want to keep in mind the size of each of these walls here. So the first thing that I am going to do is I'm going to start with this sort of X diamond shape here. And in doing that, I'm actually going to turn it this way so I can work on this one here. This is very, very simple for me, because I just simply need an X across and it will create 4 little triangles. Okay, I said diamond shapes, but it's more of a triangle shape. My apologies for that. And I'm using my ruler just to keep it straight. Again, you can use a piece of cardboard or a book, or you could just even sort of eyeball it if you'd like. I know some people out there really prefer the ruler. So I'm trying to work from corner to corner, and I'm trying to make sure that I have these 2 corners lined up the best that I can. It's a little bit of a process to go back and forth. See, if I move it here, I start maybe in the top corner and then I kind of move it down to the bottom, and I see if they're working. Sometimes I have to go back and forth. But once I've got it in a place that I feel comfortable, I just kind of draw through down here. I always make sure to hold and pin down my ruler with my thumb at least, rather than just here, so that if I have to push it, it doesn't get all crazy. So I've got one line, and then I'm just going to tilt this just for the camera's sake. I'm going to work from this corner to this corner. And this, may seem fairly simple, which is great. If you stay with some of the simpler shapes, you can just get this done pretty quickly. And there we go. I have my, I've got my 2 shape sort of patterns here, my side triangles and my up and down triangles. And what I mean by that is, if I were to go in here and cut these out, I would simply cut across. And then what I would do is I would cut across the other direction as well. Sort of magically, I have these cut out here. And I will be cutting out some of the other ones, but this is fairly straightforward and fairly simple. So really what I did was I just cut out my X, and then I cut out each triangle. And what I'm left with then are these 4 pieces, which is great. I have the 2 sides and the 2 tops. And what that means for me is that, based on my sketch and my design, I want to have 2 white triangles on the front of my building on the sides, and then I want 2 white triangles at the top and bottom on the back. So once I've sort of cut these out, and again, it shouldn't take you that long if you're following along and quickly cutting them out. Again, you're not going to miss too much, even if you're starting to cut right now. I have this sort of X symbol here. I'm taking my 2 bigger triangles, and I'm going to glue them on. I prefer to use a glue stick. You can use like a white glue or a tacky glue of some kind. The thing is, don't use too much of it, as the paper sometimes buckles a little bit. It kind of warps slightly because it is like a liquid. So I, sometimes will use a Q-tip actually and get some glue on, and then I will almost like paint the glue pretty thin as all over so that it's not globbing up. For this, I want to look at the side that has my pencil marks, which is this side. So I'm just going to flip it over, and I'm going to glue the back of my my pencil mark side here. And the places that it gets the most tricky are sort of these end corners and kind of out here and along the edge. Okay, so even now it's kind of like curling a little bit because of the glue. the beauty of the glue stick is that I can start to put this down, and then I can kind of slide it if I need to where I want it to be. And then kind of flatten it down like that. And so now I have one of these triangles. Now, I already know from doing this that inevitably this is probably a little bit far in. You can see some of the teal here. This next triangle will probably overlap, yeah, which it's doing. And I'm not too worried about that. I don't mind that so much. So I'm going to look for the side that maybe has some pencil marks on it. Both look pretty okay to me. And then you're just going to glue this down. Again, when you cut out these shapes, it's really easy. It's just cutting across the X and then cutting a few other pieces to get to glue. And then because it's not the sort of white, almost liquid glue here, oh, I think I used the wrong side, but oh well. I can still kind of move it before I press it down, and I'm not too worried because there's not going to be a lot of glue shooting out the back or anything. And ta-da! I've got my first piece done, my front shape. And it actually overlapping is kind of cool because I created these two other little triangles here. So I've got this section. There's maybe a little bit of buckling that's happening with this too. I probably overdid it with the glue, and I'll probably do a little bit less on the next round here. What I want to do now is flip it over to the back, or what I've decided the back is, and I'm going to glue these on. Now, keep in mind that these have different sides to them, right? So there is a side that is perfectly sort of lined up to fit, like so. And that's how I want to line it up. I don't want you to accidentally sort of glue it at this weird angle. Just know sort of where it's even and pointing down and where it's pointing up. So I'm going to take some glue, going to hit this, probably not as hard. And what I want to do is sort of pop it up here towards the top, both sides. Kind of even. If I need to tilt it, I can do that. I think it's working pretty well. And always line up the corners first. It's kind of the best place to go when you're doing this, rather than trying to work down and up. Always kind of get these set up because this will take care of itself if this is fairly even. Okay, doing my last piece for the back here. Just going to glue this real quick. Again, I'm making sure that my corners are lined up. It's going to be down. It probably will overlap a little bit. It's a little bit off, so just going to tilt it slightly for the sake of that. And then it looks like I didn't put enough glue really in here, which I can either put it on to this or I can just kind of get the area where it's going to kind of touch down. So my glue stick rolls away. All right, great. So now what I have are two sections here. I've got my front section, which is the teal on top and bottom, white on the sides, my back section, which is opposite. Feels pretty good, pretty satisfying once you get into that. Again, that's about just half an hour of what we're doing. We're going to work for another half an hour or so just on this. I want to tackle now the other two sides. So what I want to do is, let me grab my sketch. And I want to attempt this guy here. So the easy thing for this one is to come in and decide, okay, I'm having a rectangle. These won't be too hard either, because when I actually go to mark, and I'll show you this, and I will actually draw this one out, measure the whole thing and cut it out, is that this line is going to be in the middle and then down here. So this is I will divide this and then draw these two lines. This section I have to decide how big it is. So I kind of drew it a little bit above halfway. So I came in and let's say so I had this, I've got this side, which is, it's pretty okay here. I'm going to kind of line this up again. Sort of like this. And I have this section now where I'm going to work. I want to decide that my rectangle is maybe somewhere here-ish. I can also take this, I'm going to turn it, and I can measure out just how far down I want it to be. Now, when I look at this, it's 7 3/4. So I'm just going to sort of roughly kind of round up to, it's almost 8. So almost halfway is here. It's about somewhere in here, 3, 4-ish area. But what I want to do for my rectangle is actually I want to make it 3 inches. I just want to make it exactly 3 inches across. So I'm going to start from the top, and I'm going to make a few marks here. And I decided this just because I like some of the balance in some of what I'm doing, and then I like it to be not perfect all the way around. I don't necessarily want everything to feel perfectly symmetrical or split evenly. And the back and the front were pretty even. So I'm deciding this is about 3, leaving this right with about 4 3/4 inches. Okay. Taking this, drawing across again, I drew in my marks. Looks good. Okay. This, I'm leaving this one blank for right now. This is where I want to put in those other 2 triangle designs. Okay. So when you go to do something like this, where there are these sort of triangles with one side being really flat and then the diagonal, almost like these right angles, the simplest thing to do is, especially if you've kept it at 2, like I did, is that I can go into this and I can say, all right, now I have to kind of split this piece in half. Okay, so I'm going to move this up here a little bit for you. And so what I need to do in doing this is I have to kind of split the 3 3/4 or 3.75 in half. Okay. Now, if parents, if you need some help, you can ask your, what did I say, parents ask your kids, and kids ask your parents, depending on how you feel about your math skills at the moment. I certainly have asked a number of kids, what is that mathematically? I can also use a calculator, and I kind of know it's about 1.87 or something, if I remember correctly. It's probably somewhere in here. I'm simply going to make kind of an estimate guess. I also want to write this back up here for you. This going this way is 3 3/4 inches. I should have done this sooner for you. And this, whoops, this is 7 3/4 inches up and down. Now, again, you may have one that's a little bit bigger or something like that, but just so you have that there. Okay. I've decided that where I want to mark this is at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to mark it at 1 7/8, or again, you can just sort of eyeball it in half if you want. If I kind of eyeballed it in half, I would probably say it's about here, which is almost pretty accurate. It's a little bit off, so I'm going to just go kind of like this. Look at it. Like, well, okay, it's pretty close. I know there will be some difference here. Again, I'm drawing through here through my blank side first. It shouldn't really show up when I paste it down, but I want to make that mark first so that then what I can do is kind of come in here and make my other marks to make sure that they're kind of lining up all right. So good, that works. I again am marking it at 1 7/8. And I know measuring is not necessarily always the exciting part of it, but some people really want it to be accurate, and we want to also give you some of those tips. Now again, this is where I sort of put it on the line, and then I look and I say, okay, well my 2 marks here are a little bit higher, if you guys can see that, than the rest of this. So I'm trusting my other line, okay, and I'm just gonna kind of say, okay, I probably messed that up just a little bit. And that looks about right. So now I'm going to make my other 2 little triangles here, okay? What I want to do with this is just the same thing I did previously, where I come in corner to corner, come down, corner to corner, come down. And so now I have my shapes. I can cut these out. The cutting, I may be moving a little bit faster just simply for time. The more you stay on the line, obviously, the less crooked it will look. I also really don't always cut to the end of my scissors. I usually stop and then kind of move up. I feel I have more control than when I do sort of going all the way to the end like that. This guy is pretty simple, just coming up here. And then cutting kind of across like so. The more you have it sort of measured out and balanced, again, there will be sort of a really fun quality in seeing that you will find some of these triangles in the negative shapes as well. So let me add those. I think I'm going to just tilt it and sort of put it on this side. I'm going to take my glue here. And I want this to be at the top up here. I'm going to tilt it. I can see it's a little bit long. So what I want to do with that is sort of, I want to line up one edge as best I can. And I can see that it's sort of overlapping here. I'll deal with that at the very end. I'll show you a couple things that you can do with that. One is the obvious one, which is trimming it. Then let's put on these other little triangles. And, you know, it's going up a little bit into it. You know, you can always trim off some of the bottom or lower it down a little bit. Granted, you're going to have some places where your milk carton or your juice carton, especially if you're doing it this way, is a little bit uneven. And then like this, kind of up. Now you can see, so I did this on purpose here, that what I did was I glued down the side with my pencil marks, right? So I can always come back and just sort of erase those. I want to be careful not to erase some of the paint because sometimes that will just smudge. Now again, if you don't have colored pencils, you can be painting all of these on. If you don't have paint, you can be sort of just using the paper itself. But these are sort of my shapes now, like this. Now, I can also do any of this in other colors if I really, really want to. And that's where I want to jump to next is I could get some other colors and add into that. So what I did was I came in here, you know, I have some lavender, some blue, I have some pink. I think I want to put some pink. It's kind of my favorite color. This is under the camera, it's like a little more salmon-y. But what I've got here are some diamonds that I created and then some of that grid. So my sketch, again, was where I was going to have these boxes here and these diamonds here. So I needed to create these. I decided first how big I wanted the diamonds. So I came in and strategically approached this and said, oh, well, if I make them about 4 inches from here to here, that is going to make this a perfect square. It will mean that this is 3 3/4 inches and this way is 3 3/4 inches. And that allows me then to divide this into 3 pretty easily. And again, if you're sort of working with the math of it, just grab a calculator if you feel like your brain is going to blow up thinking about the math piece of it. You're like, oh, it's 1 1/4 inch, and then I go 1 1/4 inch, and then 1 1/4 inch, and it works out perfectly. So I now have these diamonds and I have these squares. Again, the more even, as long as it's the same on both sides, you'll get these squares pretty easily. I've made 9 of them. I don't need all 9, but I'm going to cut these out. Now, if you go to do this, you can also just simply say, oh, let me cut out a triangle somewhere and the size that I want, and then let me trace over that triangle and make it a diamond. So let me show you here. Let me see if I have something that I can sort of play with. So let's say I had a triangle. This one's a little bit off. But I came in here and I said, oh, okay, I like the way that this triangle looks. You can kind of just do a quick little sketchy trace. It's hard with paper to trace, but you can kind of get something like that. And then you could just flip it over and sort of trace the other side and get your diamond. So there are a few ways you can kind of do it mathematically, or you can kind of use some techniques like taking other shapes that you've made, or even if you had some spare ones from the beginning and you liked those shapes. So cutting these out is, you know, the same process. It's just approaching this and saying, okay, I want to stay as close to the lines as possible. And the thing is, I always keep it as one solid piece, and I try to keep it on the paper that I have here, instead of cutting out that shape and trying to draw all of this on a smaller piece. I feel I have more space to work with, and it's sturdier if I don't cut it out first. All right, what I'm going to do just on the time side of this is I'm going to simply just cut out one of these, kind of pop it on here to our milk carton. And I really like it. I'm like, okay, cool, it's working for me. I like the size of it. Again, I'm working on the back where I had the pencil marks. I would cut out all those shapes and sort of place them. All right, so I'm gonna say, all right, here is gonna be my first little diamond. And then what I wanna do next is I just want to show you 2 quick things with the squares, where again you can use that same idea of negative space. And if you haven't heard of negative space, it's the idea that 2 solid forms can form another shape or another form between them, very much like how we did with the triangles. So What I mean is like this. You can take two of these squares. Let's take these two guys. Let's move all this out of the way for a second. And I think I threw my other square. And you can actually create, very much like what we did with the triangles here, where I used a triangle and it created a triangle. It's sort of the negative space, the space where I didn't put anything down but the paint. The same thing can happen here, where I can kind of measure this out and I can say, all right, let's do this. Let me sort of put these squares in here, kind of like this, where they're supposed to go. And I'm kind of measuring. It's getting a little bit stuck to my fingers. I can kind of pop that guy down, and then I can put some glue on this. I can kind of put it here like this. Again, it probably needs a little more glue on this one, a little bit of a rotation. But what you can get are these really cool patterns just by not having to cut out more, especially if you've painted or put down a base coat of color. So, and the color can then sort of pop, and the palette that I'm sticking with, if I add some of these lavenders in or some of these blues, are that I could have gone back and actually changed these shapes to maybe these blues, and it would have popped in a different way completely. Oops, it's folding because it wasn't totally glued down, so you have to be careful of that. Okay, so you kind of have a sense of how you might put some of these shapes on. I want to show you a couple little things here just to sort of finish this off. Okay, one is that these edges, right? So if you have these edges, you can always come in and sort of attempt to cut these. And I want to show you sort of what usually happens when we cut these, is that we kind of cut and we get a little screwed up, and we start to cut and we go, great, there it is. It's perfectly jagged, as you can sort of see here. And it's not really even. So if it does end up bigger, you can always check that before you glue it down, and you can always trim it down and use your ruler and everything else. Another sort of trick in there is that you can create borders. So what I did was with some of my sort of cracker box cardboard here, I came in and I said, okay, I want kind of this like edge on my building. And naturally these sort of fold over. So I came in here and I measured out, and I won't do the whole thing, but I basically said, okay, I'm gonna sort of measure on both sides. And again, just kind of, this will be sort of the quick version, is that I kind of measured down and I cut this out so that it folds. And I had something like this. And then I added kind of a pattern. I cut into it on one side to make it sort of jagged and then round, and I kind of painted it. So it naturally folds. There's no worry about sort of creasing this, because sometimes when you crease your boxes, right, you get other creases in there and it starts to look a little bit ugly. If you built something, even if you wanted to build out really far here and you have these natural creases, these almost sort of like hinges for you, you can then come in and sort of add that at the very end to your edge. And if I colored this, if I painted it another color, I could get a really cool additional kind of thing here. So maybe actually I want to flip it because I like the sharp with the sharp, or the round, or maybe it works better the other way. But you can actually cover the edge, and then you don't have to really worry about all those ugly little edges that you've created if you don't like those. So there's a little tip. Last two things is I'm going to show you a door, real quick door, and then I'm going to show you some of the roof here. So we've got our shapes. I want to put a little door here. I'm going to put some windows. Actually, that'll probably be the very last thing I do. With a door, though, I can just kind of come at this and I can draw in sort of the door shape that I want. And I can later paint this if I see fit. I'm going to have this little sort of door here. And again, I would probably paint this, or I would use a colored pencil of some kind, right? Maybe I could sort of make it a teal or something like that. It doesn't color very well on this, but you could certainly do it. And then a little trick here. So I'm going to give you just sort of a sense of it like being open. I'm just going to use my Sharpie here. Just kind of color this in sort of a black. And again, if you put some color, or you even want to get in there and really show some detail, like it looks like it's the inside of a house, right? One of the tips too is that you could always open your front door if you feel comfortable, or if your parents say it's okay, and kind of step outside and take a photo, and then kind of draw from the photo of looking in your front door. So here's my little door, like a little, almost like mouse hole that I have here. I'm just going to trace this kind of the best that I can here. And again, what I would do is I would paint this sort of maybe even before I cut it, so that I could lightly use my pencil mark. Or what I like to do is I sometimes, if you can, draw on, again, on the back side of the door itself. So here's our like little door from our box. And I can take my glue stick and I'm just going to attach this real quick, just kind of like this right here. And then I can also, I could have just had a closed door. Like, let me say I put a little doorknob on this, right? I get into some of the decoration of this, okay? A little bit of my door. I could always glue that down just right there. Got some white paint on it, of course. But I can also kind of take some of the edge here, and I would do this at the very end, but I just want to show it to you now, where if you use your glue and you actually kind of hold it on here, you can have this door sort of standing up, and you can come in here and add more glue if it's not sort of sticking to this. And you can actually sort of perch it on here, and it will stand up and sort of be open like a little door. And it's like a fun little touch to sort of make it feel like it's more alive. I'm going to pull it off right now just because I'm going to be moving this around and it probably will fall on its own. But that's kind of like a little touch that you can kind of do there. Okay. Last two things. The roof itself. So you may want to just sort of paint this and decorate this, but some of you may also come in here and say, you know what, I want to put something like, I want it to sort of extend a little bit further down, let's say. So I'm going to give you sort of these last little sort of detailed tips here. So one of them is to take something here and just kind of cut kind of like a color, let's say, that you like, and make it bigger than you think it's supposed to, like really kind of large, okay? Because you can come in here and measure this top. It's a little bit weird because you have to sort of add together these two sections. What I'm doing is this. I'm taking this giant piece of paper and I'm putting the bottle cap on here, and I'm going to just kind of trace around this real quick. and I'm going to cut it out. Now I want to show you kind of a cool little trick to cutting this out. I know there are a few of them out there. One is that you can crease this, and without creasing too hard, just cut in. So now I have this little cut here, and carefully what I'm going to do is cut up in sort of like 4 shapes here, like kind of like I'm cutting a pizza or a pie, or even a pizza pie. And so now I have these 4 little folds. With these 4 folds, I can come around, and if I'm careful enough and I take my time, I can cut out the inside of the circle. Like so. Okay, so now I have this inside here that's going to fit over like this. So now what I can actually kind of do is I can measure this out, and I already know from here to here is 3 3/4 inches. So I could get my ruler and do that again, right? And I could kind of just sort of measure. And I could say, okay, 3 3/4 inches. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that this is sort of in the middle of those 3 3/4 inches. So I'm actually going to make it bigger than this space. So instead of marking 3 3/4 inches, I'm going to mark it at 4. But I want to mark it at 4 so that the middle of my circle is at 2. So I'm marking here, and I'm marking on the edge of my ruler. Then I'm coming down, marking 4. Here's kind of a 2. Here's sort of the edge of my ruler. And if you do this and you actually sort of make it bigger, right? So let's say I come in here and I mark these. And I cut this out. Here's a quick little fun trick, is that if you always start bigger and then you kind of trim it down to maybe a size that you want, and again, I didn't even measure the other sides of it, but I know it's pretty even right now. I can get this to go over the top and actually sort of become this cool roof. And I could always trim this down more if I want to, or I could add some detail to it. Let's say like this. I want to come in and make sort of these like rounded, sort of shingled edges. My equipment is falling everywhere. I can come around and sort of make this into a more detailed thing. And the details are what make this whole thing like really fun and really pop and really sort of special. And I don't mind that it's this long and sort of hanging over. I'm actually going to add another sort of shingled little detail here on the sides as well. So let's say I have something like this. I can always come in here with my colored pencils and I could add more to it. I could just sort of quickly kind of glue this on like so. Maybe I really like it that far out. Maybe I don't. Maybe it's too wide, but at least I've got something else going on here. Whoops, just sort of falls right off. Not enough glue, that's for sure. So I can add it on, I can sort of play with it. And then with some of these other sections, right, I could also come in and, I sort of have some of these like pre-made little pieces here. I'm going to take this off just so it doesn't totally get ruined. Like this, and adding some of those little details up here. So I have this in sort of two little parts because they can kind of get delicate, right? It's a little bit off. And there you go. And I can just sort of add something. I can, it works perfectly with my diamond, but it's just like a little bit of a trim to bring this to life. The last piece of this whole thing is going to be your windows. Okay, so you can add a door on, you can sort of make it as big or as small or anything that you'd like. Your windows are the pieces that you really want to sort of play with and have the most fun with here. And in your windows, you can add in whoever it is that you would like to sort of put in to your space. So I'm going to draw two little windows, okay? Two different shaped windows here. And for me, I'm going to start with just sort of this pen like this. And then I want to have maybe one that's like sort of longer, kind of rectangular like this. Okay. Now I might also really want to keep these windows sort of in the color scheme of what's going on. So maybe I'm going to add kind of around this. And I don't have to use the pen either. I'm doing that mostly so that you can see, so that it can show up pretty clearly. And the windows that you have here, again, should be inclusive of all that you want in your home. And you can put as many windows as you want. You can add, just a few for your immediate family. You could put in friends that maybe you haven't seen for a while. Again, you can put in some pets that really mean something to you. I've done projects like this where people put in people who are no longer with us, or even just sort of images that represent people that they're thinking of around the country or around the world. And so let me, I'll put in a couple of sort of my little friends here. One of them I'm going to draw with the pen. It's going to have sort of like this hair, like this, kind of an ear. And you can, again, you can play with this as much as you want in how you draw it, whether you use pen, whether you use colored pencils. He's kind of like, he's like this little artist. So I'm going to have him sort of holding this like little pen sort of here, like this, kind of chilling in his window. And I just want to pull it on this last piece for you. And then maybe, there's also this, like someone in my family, she's this great, fun, little sort of spunky kind of girl here. She's sitting, I'm going to sort of put like that up there. Maybe I'm going to have her sort of like arms up in the air. And again, you can put whatever you'd like sort of in here. These are her little, like kind of her hair, right? So using some of my colored pencil, kind of come in. And the thing about colored pencils, again, you can just kind of get scribbly with it, but the scribblier you are with it, the more it looks like scribbles. She's going to have sort of this like hair here. She always kind of wears it up in these two little like puffs up there. And, maybe she's got kind of this like reddish sort of shirt on. And I might put stuff in the background that like either flowers or pictures of people or curtains or things like that. And just really sort of bring in my friends, my family, the people that I care about, even just images of things that maybe spark some hope or kind of like some desire for you. Whatever it is that you feel you want to include or that you feel is maybe needed to include. I'm going to make his shirt, actually I'm going to make his shirt sort of blue. So you can do this and you can play with all of these. And then the best part is when you cut them out. This will be the last little piece of our adventure. I'm going to give some like curtains here, kind of coming down. Is that you take these and you just cut them out. And again, if you want to play with size or have them very, very accurate, or even use some of the shapes that you have going on in this, you can do that and just sort of place them around and have people doing different things. Maybe it's, you have that relative who falls asleep on the couch every November, December when they come to visit. Maybe it's that you have uh, a younger sibling who really loves dogs, who is constantly sort of talking about them and thinking about them. Maybe it's somebody cooking in a kitchen. You can have bigger windows. Like, you can also have, again, people who maybe are no longer with us in here, but you can just kind of add these on and sort of play with your little house. So there are a few little things that you can do, that you can play with. But again, add the pieces that you want to add to your building, and hopefully you create something that really inspires you. If you'd like to share it with us, please feel free to do so. In addition to that, we always have classes and workshops and talks every single week at the museum, so please check it out. Hopefully you're staying safe, and we look forward to seeing you sometime in the future, and thank you for joining us for Walt Disney's birthday.